Hello, Somerville, and welcome to Culture Club. My name is Rachel Strutt. I work at the Somerville Arts Council, and I am your host for this program. Today, we are going to be talking about all things micro. And the reason for this is that our ArtBeat festival this year, which is coming up July 19th and 20th, we have a theme each year for ArtBeat because we like to mix it up, keep things fresh. So our theme this year is micro. So we have a number of performers who are interpreting this theme in different ways, and we're also working with a few artists who are going to be showcasing their infinitesimal art objects. So I would like to start by introducing my two guests, both artists who work on the micro scale. First, I have Dina Gjertsen. Welcome.
Hi.
And Judith Klausner.
Hi.
Lovely to have you both here. Now, we were talking before we started shooting about how both of you not only work on the micro scale, you both also work with food. Dina, how long have you been making, why don't you tell people first what you make, and then how long have you been making micro food?
I think I've only been making micro food for about 2 years, though miniature things and dollhouse things have always been kind of interesting to me. I make most of this out of polymer clay with some other elements involved.
Okay. And why food and why micro?
Well, mostly because I just started doing it and I liked it, and the stuff that I made looked kind of cool to me, so I continued to do it. Food is because it's kind of making stuff that's sort of organic and imperfect. It comes a little bit more easily to me than making an orange that looks like a miniature orange is a lot easier to me than making, say, a small square. I'd be completely lost at making a small exact square.
Interesting. So. You managed to make the food look quite realistic. Obviously the scale's a little skewed, but the cake, for example, the frosting, it looks like frosting, and that's more glossy, whereas your what else do we have here? Your sushi, it looks like a little more matte and it looks like actual sushi. Do you spend a lot of time thinking about like glazes or how to get the right texture so it looks realistic?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it, and there's definitely some gloss involved. I think the most important aspect of making food look realistic is actually translucency, which is why polymer clay is such a wonderful material for that, because you can get translucent polymer clay and you can combine it with other colors. And even food that you might think of as being somewhat opaque has some translucency to it, like a slice of cucumber. And so if you're not able to get that translucency right, then it's never going to look real. But if you are, you can. And polymer clay is the one material that I've found that can really capture that.
Interesting. Now, Judith, can you tell us a little bit about your work?
Well, I say that I like to play with my food. The last few years, I've worked with packaged food as my art material. So the example that I brought is a cameo carved from an Oreo cookie. And there's really, Oreos already have all of that embossing on the cookie. They have lovely color contrast, so really I think they're sort of an elegant starting point. But
sure. And when you break the Oreo in two, you also have the black border around the what do you call that? The white goo in the middle. So you have a little frame.
Cream. I think that Oreo specifically calls it cream, spelled in a very particular way that is probably trademarked.
I'm sure it's all natural cream.
Oh, yes.
And we should mention, you also won a grant from the Somerville Arts Council, and we showcased your Oreo cameos in our Nibble book.
Yes, I've been very lucky that the Somerville Arts Council has offered me so much support.
I wasn't begging for like a shout out or anything. And I should mention that, Dina, you used to be on our board.
I know, I was on the board.
And now for ArtBeat, Judith, you have something a little different planned, your micro museum. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So this idea has been in the works for a long time, actually, trying to figure out a way to use these unused little nooks and crannies that you get in the urban landscape as a way, turn them into a way to show art, because we have so many amazing artists in this area and not nearly enough spaces where we can show their work. So
that's so true. And now you were telling us this niche that you found is in Union Square between the Independent and Subway, and how big is it and who owns it?
It's this little alleyway between the two buildings, and those sorts of things seem to happen a lot. This one has more character than your average niche between commercial businesses. It's about 16 inches wide, and it looks like at one point it was bricked up with a 1-inch thick brick wall, and then that's been unbricked up to about 4.5 feet. So it really has this look of almost a mysterious little doorway, which I love. And it's not actually clear to anyone, including apparently the owners of the businesses, who owns that space. It could be either one. It could be both of them, own some portion of it. It could be neither of them.
Or like Dina said, the rats.
Or right, yes. I think there was a pigeon back there once that I saw. Could be a pigeon space.
Well, hopefully they will appreciate the curatorial work you're bringing as well.
I like to think that the work is going to be accessible to everyone, including the pigeons and the rats.
Wildlife.
And we'll definitely check that there isn't anyone stuck back there before we put it in.
And I think it's funny that when I learned you were doing the micro museum, I didn't know you were working on this, and you didn't know our theme for ArtBeat this year was micro, so we invited her to debut the micro museum at ArtBeat, and then you're going to bring it to Union Square, right?
It was very fortuitous. It was really exciting to learn that the theme this year was micro, because in addition to the micro museum, I love all things micro and miniature, and I'm sort of salivating over Dina's food over here.
When the theme came out, did all your friends email it to you? Because that's what happened to me. People were like, Dina.
What happens?
Everybody emailed me about the theme, like 6 different people.
Oh, interesting.
Contacted me because they knew that my stuff would be perfect.
Yeah, it's interesting to see who's come out of the woodwork. We have a guy who runs an Acme flea circus. There are only 2 fleas, Midge and Madge, and they do chariot races and trapeze.
Wow.
We have a band that makes it.
They live in Somerville?
They live in New York.
Oh,
They're coming up from New York.
Right.
But actually, Madge and Midge are with us today. You just can't see them. Who else do we have? We have a band that makes its instruments using microprocessors and do a lot of circuit bending. So artists have really interpreted the theme in a lot of fun ways. Now, Judith, why is small appealing to you?
Oh, it's a hard question because it's sort of a fundamental thing for me. I've loved miniatures ever since I was little. Anything small scale. I never actually liked, until I was an adult, I didn't like Brussels sprouts, except that they looked like miniature cabbages. So even though I didn't like the taste, I was always really excited when we had them for dinner because I could bring over my dolls who were the right scale and feed them, and it was very exciting. But I think that there is just, with miniature scale artwork, there's an inherently intimate experience that you have when you interact with the work. And that, is a big part of the idea behind the Micro Museum, is that there are lots of venues for really big art. More and more spaces are being renovated to get bigger and bigger, and these huge pieces, which certainly people interact with in their own interesting and unique way, that those sort of engulf your space. But with really small scale work, to experience it, you have to sort of get up into its space, and it's in your space, and that's a very intimate interaction with a piece of art that's very appealing to me.
Very interesting. I want to hear more about the process that you both have for working on this scale, but we are going to take a quick break. We're going to go to the Cultural Club calendar, and then we will be back. outside in Union Square, and I have Kelvy Bird with me. Welcome.
Thank you.
And continuing with our discussion of all things micro, Kelvy is going to be conducting a very interesting social experiment at our ArtBeat Festival this year called Micro Meet. Can you tell us about this experiment?
Yes. So Micro Meet actually came about when I was out with some friends and we were thinking about how we could meet more people, and it kind of came up between us as this would be a great sort of social experiment, not like speed dating, but an iteration of speed dating where you have something smaller and it's between age groups and really like all people of your community who you would see on the street and maybe be interested in knowing but not have an opportunity to meet.
And why do you think this is important? What does it say about our society that we need a fun gimmick game like this to meet our neighbors?
Well, I think, in some ways, maybe when I was growing up, it felt like society was maybe safer then than it sometimes feels now. And there are certainly a lot of people that I would want to engage with or know more about, but I would be hesitant maybe to start a conversation. And I don't know if that's just me or if that's other people, but the idea is that this is a safe context where you can just have a 3-minute conversation with somebody prompted by some questions and just, that's it.
And do you think it also is tied to geography? Sometimes people say the Northeast is kind of cold.
Oh, that's a good question. Maybe. I mean, I think that certainly we keep ourselves a little bit maybe more guarded until we loosen up or we know someone or we're introduced to someone. So I think that's probably part of it.
And we're probably also, this isn't a geographical issue, but we're also more plugged into our iPhones and technology. Yeah. And that's another way of being zoned out and maybe not meeting your neighbor.
I think so, definitely. Like the times when I walk even down into Davis Square where we're going to be doing the micro meet, I have my music going, and a lot of other people do too. And so, yeah, you kind of keep yourself zoned in your little safe territory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I'm happy we're doing this interview amidst the chaos of Union Square, because this is it's kind of similar to how it will be at ArtBeat. This is going to take place on the traffic island in the middle of the festival. There are going to be thousands of people milling about. Now, tell us how you're going to structure the micro meet.
Okay, so I think right now it is an experiment, so it's still, working. But I think we're going to have like 2 bands of chairs facing each other and a set amount of time. So you basically join in for 10 minutes. And then we'll have chairs facing each other, so you can choose to sit in one section or the other section. And then we'll have it timed. So all you need to do is sit down. We'll have a little bucket with some questions. Micro questions.
Okay.
And then we'll have sections of 3 minutes where we'll manage the timing, and then you get to basically pick a when it sounds, the beep or something, you pick a question, and then you have 3 minutes to share 3 questions with the person across from you. Then we'll sound the music, and then we rotate chairs, and you have a new person. So it's basically 3 minutes, 3 questions. Oh, sorry, wait. 10 minutes. How did I figure this out? 10 minutes, 3 questions, 3 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if people are willing to spare 10 minutes, they're going to meet 3 people.
That's the plan right now.
Okay.
And you can do it as many times as you want. So if you get there and you really like meeting your neighbors, you can come back for the next round.
Excellent. Okay, so should we give people a demo of what this is going to entail?
Can I just add one more thing?
Absolutely.
The one thing for me, I think I mentioned this before, this sort of going across age differences, and especially living in a community that's so diverse, that this is a chance to really bridge some of those maybe differences that we sometimes see or feel with other people in just this, I barely ever talk to 8-year-olds or, I don't talk to kids at all. So I think it's a great opportunity for people to just mix it up.
Excellent. Yeah. And who knows, maybe there'll be a love connection.
There could be.
Okay, let's get started.
Okay, so we'll have little buckets out for people.
Okay.
With lots of good questions that we will crowdsource from the community.
Okay, and for the purposes of this show, Kelvy and I are going to pretend that we are complete strangers.
Okay, so this is... Oh, let's do 2 questions, so I'll do a question.
Okay.
Okay. So the first question So the music sounds do-do-do, and then there's quiet. I pick a question. The question is, would you prefer to be president or a rock star? And I would love to be a rock star.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm really shy actually, so the idea of being on stage and having a lot of people looking at me is kind of terrifying, but if I could do it, I would do it in a second and wear like sequins and leather and stuff like that, which I would never wear.
Maybe the stage would give you the excuse to kind of explore this other side of your personality.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
How about you? Which would you rather be, president or a rock star?
Both at the same time, kind of like Obama's doing, because I like to think that Obama's kind of a rock star too. So that's a tough question, because being a rock star is glamorous, would obviously be really fun, but it's also tiring because you're on the road all the time.
Yeah.
And being the president, like, I would have to say goodbye to sleep probably, but to have a chance to make a difference is pretty exciting. So that's my answer.
Cool.
All right.
All right.
My turn? Okay. What is your favorite summer drink? That is a fun question. Okay, I would have to say I really like mezcal, which is kind of like tequila, but it's from more like the south of Mexico. And actually Back Bar, they have some great drinks with mezcal, and you're seeing mezcal more and more on the menu these days. So like mezcal with lime juice and maybe a little soda water, something like that. It's really refreshing. And mezcal has an interesting flavor. It almost tastes a little bit like gasoline, which doesn't sound appealing, but it's smoky and really interesting.
I've never even heard of it.
Okay, well, you're gonna have to experiment.
I will.
Explore. What about you? What's your favorite?
My
summer
favorite drink, I think it's like the mix of, I guess it's called an Arnold Palmer.
Okay.
I don't know. I just like going to the cafes around town and getting, usually like I want an iced tea, but then I think I shouldn't have any more caffeine, so I cut it with the ice, with the lemonade, and I like doing that because then it's like this refreshing thing I would never make at home. So it's like this little treat.
And it's like a drink, but yet it's lemonade, so it's
That's
wholesome.
right. I can eat it. I can drink it during the day. I can drink it during the day, and you can pretty much find it around here. Most places know what it is. So
Very good.
that's actually, and I always forget. Every year I forget that that's an option in summer, and then summer comes around, and then I'm sort of out and about, and I'm reminded, oh yeah, I have this option of iced tea and lemonade.
Nice, nice.
Yeah. Do you want to try one more?
Sure.
Oh.
Okay, actually, you know what,
Oh,
Kelvy?
ding, 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 ding. Time to go. Time to rotate.
It was, you were a stranger and now you're an acquaintance.
But I've seen you on the streets. I always wondered who you were and what you did.
That's me. That's me.
You work at the Arts Council,
I do,
right?
I do. So hopefully you've enjoyed this experiment, and more importantly, hopefully you will participate in this social experiment that Miss Bird will be leading at ArtBeat. And if you miss ArtBeat, maybe this will encourage you just to walk up to someone on the street and ask them a random question. Thank you.
So yeah, you can get to know your neighbors.
Thank you so much, Kelvy.
Thanks, Rachel.
Hello and welcome back to the studio. I'm still here with Dina and Judith, and we are surrounded by this micro but delicious looking food, and you guys are making our camera guys hungry. So Dina, you are working on 2 different scales. Can you tell us a little bit about the 2 scales you're working on?
Yep. So the main scale that I started working on is something that's called dollhouse scale, or 1-inch scale, in which essentially 1 inch in my objects equals 1 foot in the real world.
Okay.
There's sometimes I play a little fast and loose with that. The other scale that I've been working in is called play scale, or American Girl doll scale is what I call it, because I started doing it because my niece has an American Girl doll, as does every other 8-year-old girl in the United States. And this is 1 inch, and this equals 6 inches in the real world, roughly. And it is kind of fun sometimes to make objects that are basically the same but in 2 different scales. And part of the reason I made this is that small children are very attracted to my work when I sell it, but not all of the stuff that I make is really a toy. Because you could wreck it really easily. So it's fun to make. This is pretty indestructible. So a little girl could play with that for quite a while.
And so do you have a lot of customers, a lot of 8-year-old girl customers who are looking to furnish their American Girl?
Yeah, I mean, I did, especially at Union Made a couple weeks ago. There were a lot of little kids with their money clutched in their hands. and I had to give some little kid discounts. I think for ArtBeat, I'm gonna try and maybe have an area that's just for little kids to spend their hard-earned money at, because I feel a little mean to have kind of art sale prices on things that are so attractive to children.
That's nice.
Yeah.
And so are you mostly doing craft shows, or do you also sell things in stores or on your website? Or
I mean, I have a little Etsy shop. I didn't really start doing it with the intention of selling it at all, but partially I was just making a lot of it, and then I would post pictures of it on my blog or on Facebook, and friends of mine would ask me if I was going to sell it. So that's when I sold some stuff at Bazaar over Christmas, and it was a phenomenal success. I was really surprised at how interested people were in it. I had no idea that people would like it or want to purchase it. So now that they do, I've been doing more of those. But.
And can you tell us a little bit about your process? I'm holding a piece here, this is going to be sushi, right?
Yeah, it's a sushi cane, and this is, I guess, something that interests people the most. So this cane started out as about this big.
Okay.
So a fatter cylinder made up of a whole lot of different elements.
Okay.
And the great thing about polymer clay is that it really stays looking exactly the same. And the way you reduce a cane is you just slowly start massaging it down until it gets smaller and smaller. So for example, this pair of earrings and the sushi on this platter are made from the same cane. It's just, I cut these off when the cane was bigger, and I cut these off after I'd made it much smaller.
How small could you go?
I mean, I don't know. It doesn't really smear that much. I think you could go quite small, but at a certain point, there wouldn't be any point in doing it because people's eyes couldn't see it anymore.
Yeah. Interesting. And now what about your process, Judith? And you have some of your raw edible materials here. Can you show folks?
Yes, these are the art Oreos.
Okay.
Not for eating.
Okay.
They look remarkably like other Oreos, except that they're very stale.
Okay.
They don't actually have to be stale for the process to work. Just you tend to go through cookies a lot slower when you're sculpting them than when you're eating them, or at least than when I'm eating them.
And how long does it take you to make one of your cameos?
It really ranges a lot depending on the level of detail in the particular piece and on the environment. So, if it's hot and humid out, that's going to take longer to work with because the cream gets harder to work with, and I will occasionally...
Because it gets softer? That makes it harder to work with? Huh.
It'll get too soft to be workable well, and I will occasionally have to pop it in the freezer to get it workable
I have to do the same thing. There was 2 weeks, I couldn't work. I had to keep putting stuff in and out of the freezer.
Interesting. Heat is a killer to miniature food art.
Apparently.
So it really ranges between probably 3 to 10 hours, depending.
Okay.
So I guess it starts with, as you were talking about a little bit before, having to slice it in half, and that was actually an interesting process when I first started doing this, because I thought, I feel like on commercials and stuff, you see kids taking the Oreos and just twisting them apart, and all the cream is on one side and it's perfectly split. And so I thought, how hard can this be? I can do this. And so I had my box of cookies and I started prying them apart.
Do you have to twist them? Like, do you have a methodology now?
So I do have a methodology. It turns out twisting is not it, at least for me. It was, I spent so many cookies trying, I would pull it apart like this, and I would twist it apart like that, and I twisted it in the other direction, and I'd put it in the freezer first, and I'd warm it up first, and nothing. It kept splitting. The cream was all a mess, and I tried sneaking up on it, and it never worked.
So the commercials are a fiction, that we've been misled.
Those were carefully staged Oreos right there. Otherwise, there are people out there with serious Oreo separating skills that I do not possess. But a friend of mine actually suggested taking a very thin piece of wire, and just like you'd cut clay, slicing across the top, trying to get as close to one cookie as possible. And I've done it that way ever since. It actually works pretty much perfectly.
Excellent. Now, when you're not playing with your Oreos, you are also coming up with ideas like this micro museum. Can you tell people briefly the dimensions of the micro museum and how you're going to be curating the micro museum?
So the internal dimensions of the gallery space are 16 inches wide, give or take, a little bit of thickness for the added walls on the inside, 8 inches deep and 10 inches tall. So it's a pretty micro gallery.
Yeah. So how many artists in each show?
That'll vary depending on the show. So we have the first show. The first show is curated. It's not totally installed yet. 2 of my artists have dropped off their work, and I'm still waiting on the other ones. but the due date hasn't come yet, so they're all good. So there are 4 artists in the first show, which is called Invisible Cities.
Okay.
And is exploring the urban landscape in different ways. So it sort of ties into the whole idea of the micromuseum itself, which is also an exploration of uses of the urban landscape.
Yeah, I think it fits in so well to the Somerville arts landscape because there are so many artists in Somerville, but there aren't always enough spaces for people to showcase their work or enough venues for bands to play. And I think Somerville is good at finding quirky solutions for showcasing art. So I think it's a really good fit. And we should tell people, when is the opening to your micro museum?
The official opening and ribbon cutting ceremony, and Rachel here is actually going to be cutting the ribbon.
With a tiny pair of scissors, right?
Yes, a very decorative tiny pair of scissors. And that is on Thursday, August 15th.
Excellent. And we will see you both at ArtBeat. Dina, you'll be selling your nano food.
I will.
And Judith, will you be with your museum that day?
I will be. I will be staffing the museum.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, and see you on the next episode of Culture Club.